Over 3,000 years ago in the land of Egypt, they buried a king in this tomb. He was not a great king. He conquered no enemies, left no laws to attest to his wisdom. In fact, he was only 9 years old when he was crowned, only 18 when he died. Yet on the walls of his tomb, they painted his likeness in the company with the gods because they believed that he too was a god. And they buried him with a king's ransom in gold and jewels and art and artifacts. They believed that he would rise from the tomb each day and accompany the sun across the heavens. Most of all, they believed he would live forever. His name was Tutankhamun, King Tut. This appeared on the plains of Egypt almost 5,000 years ago, 2,000 years before Tutankhamun, the step pyramid of the pharaoh Zoser. It is the first large structure in the world to be built completely of stone. It took many years to build as workmen using hand labor slowly worked the stones from the quarries, chipping them square, then smoothing them down so they would fit one upon the other. No mortar was used. Less than 200 years later, pyramid building had evolved into this, the Great Pyramid of Cheops at Giza, one of the wonders of the world. 2 million blocks of stone weighing about 2 tons each. It took 200,000 men 20 years to build, and when archaeologists finally discovered the burial chamber inside, it was empty. Other pyramids, those of Khafre and Menkaure, as well as several lesser pyramids, make up a massive burial ground on the plains near the ancient capital of Memphis. And what of the Sphinx, that strange, silent, mystical figure crouching in the sands near the pyramids? Is it too a tomb? Not really. The Sphinx is solid rock, carved from a single abutment of limestone during the reign of Khafre, builder of the second pyramid. The face is that of Khafre, and he stands watch over the pyramid tombs, probably forever. This man is doing today what Egyptians of antiquity did thousands of years ago, making mud bricks dried in the sun. Indeed, life has changed little for the fellahin or peasant of Egypt. The waters of the Nile dominate his life as ever. How many generations of fellahin have carried grain here to be crushed into flour? And for how many centuries has the river turned to millstones such as this, grinding into flour the corn which was grown in the rich black soil left over the millennia by the receding floodwaters of the river? The mosaic of life is repeated over and over again, generation upon generation, century upon century. Time moves on, and yet, in many ways, never moves at all. And so it is here, in the Valley of the Kings, necropolis of Thebes, burial ground of the pharaohs. It's a hellish place, relentlessly hot and dry, home only for scorpions. The temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak began almost 4,000 years ago as a small shrine to a local god, someone to whom villagers could appeal for protection, for good crops, for the birth of a child. But then a pharaoh, the 12th dynasty, added to the shrine and dedicated to the king of the gods, the sun god Amun-Ra. And succeeding pharaohs competed with their predecessors in erecting even larger and more beautiful additions, as well as statues of themselves. And by the time of the 18th dynasty, 600 years later, it was a magnificent complex of courts and temples, pylons and obelisks, awesome in its majesty and fittingly called the Throne of the World. The Temple of Luxor, a few miles upstream, was connected with Karnak by a paved causeway lined on either side with sphinxes, symbolic of Amun-Ra, the sun god. It was built by Amenhotep III more than 3,000 years ago. But Ramses II came by almost 200 years later and built a new entrance pylon telling of his victories in battle, enormous statues of himself, also a magnificent obelisk whose hieroglyphics give him credit for the whole thing. And you wonder, was it love of God or was it vanity that created these marvels of antiquity? As you walk among these silent yet eloquent stones from so long ago, it's not difficult to imagine them as the centerpiece of a thriving and sophisticated civilization. This was Thebes, capital of the empire, home of Pharaoh, the god king. Now, in the West, when we think of the ancient times, we think of the Roman Forum or the Colosseum or the Parthenon in Greece. They are old, part of our ancient world. Yet when these Egyptian stones were being raised, there was not yet a Rome or a Greece. They were 1,000 or more years away. Of all of Egypt's wonders, there is no place with more appeal to the imagination than the Valley of the Kings. 30 pharaohs were buried here. On the afternoon of November 4th, 1922, after 8 years of disappointments, Howard Carter ended his search for King Tut. Here in the rubble hidden beneath the tomb of Ramses VI, workmen discovered a passageway sealed for more than 3,000 years. Carter refused to unseal the tomb until his patron Lord Carnarvon came from London. On the 26th of November, Carter led his group down 16 steps to a second sealed doorway. Carter cut a hole in the door, peered in, and told the world, "I see wonderful things. Everywhere I see gold." The king's comfort was provided for in the tomb. Here, an elaborate chair in gold, with the sun god spreading his wings in benediction amid meticulous inlays of ivory, wood, and Egyptian cloisonne. And then they found the most magnificent chair of all, the golden throne of Tutankhamun, believed to have been used at his coronation in the temple at Karnak. Its lion's heads have guarded pharaohs since the time of Khafre and beyond. But the decoration itself is most untraditional, a non-rigid, informal style, a studied awkwardness that is really very appealing. All done in gold and even rarer silver with inlays of glass paste. Certainly this is not the Tutankhamun of majesty and power. No, this is the king as a child, 12, perhaps 14. Take away the crown, and he could be any child, anywhere. A child's playthings were buried with him in the tomb. This is a game called Senet, an early Egyptian version of hares and hounds. It must have been a favorite. This is one of 4 sets found in the tomb. But all was not play, even in the afterlife. There would be times, it was believed, when the gods might call upon Tutankhamun to work in the fields, or to gather wood, or to do some other manual labor. And even this was provided for. Small dolls called shawabtis, made in the exact likeness of Tutankhamun, were placed in the tomb. And when the gods called him to work, one of the dolls would rise up and do the job, sparing the king himself the indignity of doing manual labor. There were 401 of the shawabtis found in the tomb, one for each day of the year, and 36 to act as foremen for groups of 10 or more. The organization was superb, all to ensure the king an uninterrupted eternity of ease and comfort. a magnificent chalice fashioned from a single block of alabaster. Flanked by the god of eternity and bearing the cartouche of Tutankhamun Nebkepere, it bears a lovely inscription. May you spend millions of years, you who love Thebes, sitting with your face to the north wind, your eyes beholding happiness. And to guard all this treasure, 2 statues of the king, painted black, the color of the underworld, stood guard at the walled-up doorway to the burial chamber, a doorway that Howard Carter would patiently take apart brick by brick. And as he peered inside, the first man to do so in more than 3,000 years, he said, "I saw a wall of gold." Howard Carter did indeed see a wall of gold, the first of 4 walls of gold that separated Carter from his life's goal, the royal sarcophagus of Tutankhamun. It was the wall of a golden shrine, a shrine that almost filled the burial chamber from wall to wall, a shrine lined in gold and bearing the likenesses of the gods and inscriptions from the sacred book of the dead. And within the shrine, another smaller but just as elaborate. And within that one, a third. And within the third, a 4th shrine. Like a Chinese puzzle, 4 shrines, one within the other, all to protect the mummy of the king. And finally, after months of work, all the shrines were dismantled and taken away. And for the first time could be seen the entire sweep of the tomb, from the entrance of the antechamber to the inscribed walls of the burial chamber itself. Baboons represent the 12 hours of darkness the king must spend in the tomb each night. And on another wall, a grieving queen Oxynamen offers to the king the Ankh, the sign of life. And behind him stands Anubis, also holding an Ankh. Again, in the tomb itself, the theme is life. The funeral procession is depicted on another wall, and the friends of Tutankhamun are shown all in a line, pulling the ornate sled across the desert sands to the tomb. And on the sled, the mummy of the king. This tomb was not meant for Tutankhamun. It was for his chief minister, Ai. But the king died so young, apparently his own tomb was not yet ready. And so he was buried here, and the walls hastily painted. The sarcophagus, however, is that of a king. It was hewn by hand from a solid block of brown quartzite, and a master sculptor applied the decorations, incising the delicate hieroglyphics along the sides and down the ends. On each corner, the goddesses Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Selkit protect the body with their outstretched wings. Inside was a huge wooden coffin covered with gold and made in the form of the god Isiris. The face, however, was that of Tutankhamun. In his hands were the emblems of Isiris, the crook and the flail, encrusted with gold and colored glass. And inside, still another coffin, this one too in the form of Osiris, with arms crossed, hands holding the crook and the flail. And again, the face was that of Tutankhamun. It was made of wood, but covered with sheet gold and inlaid with colored glass, jasper, lapis lazuli, and turquoise, all in a feather pattern in a technique called Egyptian cloisonne. Even the bottom of the coffin, under the feet, was filled with hieroglyphic incantations and a goddess, wings outspread in protection. Archaeologist Carter was puzzled by the extreme weight of the coffins. It wasn't until he opened this second coffin that the puzzle was solved. A third coffin inside. It weighed over 400 pounds, made of pure gold more than 1/8 of an inch thick. Like the other two coffins, it too was in the form of Osiris, with the features of Tutankhamun. The idea being that since Osiris had risen from the dead through the magic of his wife Isis, Pharaoh, made to look like Osiris, would likewise be assured of resurrection and eternal life. Here again, the wings of the goddess Nephthys unfold in protection, and hieroglyphics repeat the magic phrases from the Book of the Dead, calling on the gods to grant life to the dead king. The coffin is over 6 feet long, a masterpiece of the goldsmith's art, and covered completely with engravings, hieroglyphics, and inlay. It must have taken months, perhaps years, to design, to fashion, and to execute such an exquisite work of art. In fact, many of the objects buried with the king could not have been built within the 70 days between his death and his burial. They must have been fashioned for the tomb long before his death, and they were. It was the custom to begin preparations for the king's tomb as soon as the king was crowned. And the massive outer coffin, the beautiful second coffin, and this magnificent golden coffin, all were built years before, waiting only for the king's death to be put to use. In ancient Egypt, the business of death was a thriving business. But even this coffin of solid gold was not the last surprise for Howard Carter, because when he opened this coffin, he was faced with the most magnificent find of all, the great gold mask of Tutankhamun. The mask was placed like a helmet over the shoulders and head of the king's mummy, extending well past the breast. It was a fantastic work of art, and in a way, it was still another claim for the king to eternal life. The 3 coffins had been made to look like Osiris. The mask presented Tutankhamun as the sun god, who was said to have a face of gold and eyebrows and eyelashes of lapis lazuli. Such a god would rise each day and soar across the heavens in a fiery trail. Thus, life was assured the dead god king. Around the neck of the mummy was placed this collar of gold and glass. It is the vulture goddess Nekhbet, whose outspread wings provide magical protection. And there was more to protect the king. This dagger was found wrapped in the linen bands which covered the body. It is made of solid gold, as is the sheath. A whole gathering of golden gods was also buried with the king and placed in the treasury. Sekhmet, with the head of a lioness, also called the Eye of Ra, the sun god. Gemesu, he who gives light with his 2 eyes. Horus, son of Osiris, patron of the kings of Egypt. And Ptah, one of the oldest gods in the Egyptian pantheon. He was the chief god of Memphis, the first capital of a united Egypt, where he was declared to be the creator of the world. 4 coffins containing the embalmed liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines of the king were topped with 4 likenesses of the king carved in alabaster. But here the king seems younger, which indicates that the work was probably done early in his reign, when preparations were made to craft the objects he would need in his tomb for the afterlife. And holding all of this was a golden shrine, still in the Cairo Museum. It is crowned by a standard of cobras holding the sun god, and guarded on all 4 sides by the goddesses Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Selket. An inscription defines their roles in these words: These 4 goddesses shall be with you, accompanying you, driving out every evil that is in your flesh, exterminating those who come against you, and setting their magic spells against them. But on the shrine in Cairo, one goddess, Selkit, is missing. That's because she is here in America. And along with the king's great golden mask, she is the star of the show. With a grace that belies her age, she stands alone, aloof, eternally poised and serene. But of all the things, Tutankhamun's golden scepter tells the story best. It was probably given to him at his coronation and was buried with him in the tomb. And the hieroglyphic inscription reads, "The good God, the beloved, dazzling of face like the sun's disk when it shines, the son of Amun, Nebkepere, live forever." The sun's disk shines still on the face of Egypt, and in the tomb, in the Valley of the Kings, in the gilded coffin resting in the great stone sarcophagus, Tutankhamun lies at rest. We all know him a little better now. He was a king, but he was also a child, and when he died, he had but one wish to ask of his gods. He wanted to live forever. So far, he has.